asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. Web fire, math evil, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masked and boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, set ready for that ghost kill.
Welcome to the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever, and well, tonight's going to be a historic night for Canada. Right now, we just don't know which way it's actually going to end up breaking, but I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions in the comment section. Essentially, tonight, the only thing we're going to be focusing on is the Emergencies Act and updates surrounding the Trucker Freedom Convoy protest. And I'll also be highlighting from a variety of different sources some of the mainstream media, corporate press, legacy press's narrative, and juxtaposing it to the citizen journalists that are boots on the ground and arguably, at least from my perspective, showcasing what's actually going on in our country. Before I jump in, I'm going to have a bit of a monologue, but I'd love to hear from you guys as well. What's your thoughts? What's your read on the situation? Do you believe the Emergencies Act is going to pass tonight in Parliament? Do you think enough MPs will stand up and speak on behalf of the average Canadian citizen? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions in that comment section. But yeah, let's just jump into it again. It's definitely going to be a historic night. We're 1 week from essentially Justin Trudeau on February 14th announcing the enactment of the Emergencies Act. And now we're going to find out whether Parliament supports him or not. And I guess before even getting into tonight's updates, I just want to re-emphasize for probably the millionth time now on this channel, I've never been prouder of my fellow Canadians and to be a Canadian, and at the same time, never been more ashamed of our government, our administration, and the institutions in Canada. And it's a really conflicting, I guess, sense of emotions. And I imagine I'm not the only one. And again, throughout me creating this Maple Pill show, the overall goal was always just to remind you guys, you're not alone, you're not crazy. In fact, what I believe a lot of bad actors want is for you to feel alone, is for you to feel isolated, is for you to feel crazy. So again, just want to let you guys know you're not alone. And in fact, I've never been prouder of my fellow Canadians. Now, to establish a couple of things here, I just want to state unequivocally that the Freedom Convoy has been a peaceful protest. And in my opinion, they've shown admirable constraint despite police and politicians constantly agitating the situation, constantly using divisive and deriding language towards the protesters. We've seen this from our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who completely ignores the protesters at the start and belittled and talked down to them at every opportunity. Rather than extend an olive branch, he would never consider doing that with these protesters. And I can't help but feel like tonight, depending upon how the vote goes, and I'll be honest, guys, I'm kind of black-pilled on this. I think that they're going to pass the vote, and that truly is a shame, not just for me and mine or freedom-loving Canadians, but for every single Canadian. And honestly, this is bigger than Canada at this point in time. We're literally watching a cultural civil war playing out across the West, right? This isn't just about Canada. It's not just even about the Commonwealth countries. I think that we're going to see the future of, democracies, republics, and all freedom-loving countries, institutions, and people. This is an important moment in history. And I believe that we're witnessing the attempt and creation of a police state here in Canada where crimes and illegal activity are created and punished retroactively. We're seeing this right now with the narrative both from the politicians as well as the mainstream media going after those that supported the trucker convoy protest. And again, this was a peaceful protest. You may disagree with their choice of implementing it, right? You may disagree with some of the blockades of the border, but understand that to enact the Emergencies Act for the first time in Canadian history, and if we extend it in the definition to include the War Act, this is, I understand, I believe only the fourth or fifth time that it's ever been enacted in all of Canada's history, is a wild abuse of power. And at this moment in time, I can no longer give the benefit of the doubt to Justin Trudeau, to politicians that back him, to administrators, to institutions, to peace officers and police officers that are willing to enact these these truly unprecedented measures against their fellow citizens. We're watching the financial crippling of political opponents in real time. And again, understand that for the vast majority of individuals that donated to the trucker protest, the Freedom Convoy, it wasn't illegal when they did so. And in fact, arguably, it still isn't. It appears to be such a murky situation we find ourselves in, and the government is just running full steam ahead, regardless of the implications. It's hard for me to not want to draw comparisons to the Biden administration and some of the rules and laws we've seen them try to enact, knowing that they were unconstitutional in the United States and not really caring because they wanted just to make progress on whatever their individual goals and motivations were. We're watching the demonization of our fellow citizens and attempted creation of a class system or a group of subhumans almost at this point in time. And we've heard that language from our prime minister when he talked about not wanting the unvaccinated to sit beside his children on a bus or an airplane. At the same time, it's hard for me to not call into question the motivations of all these individuals. We've been gaslit on so many things at this point in time that I'm sure I'll forget some from this list, but we've been gaslit on the lab leak theory. We were gaslit on the effectiveness of masks, lockdowns, mandates, and vaccines, on the difference of deaths from COVID and deaths with COVID. And yet they still expect us to blindly trust them that they've got our best interests at heart when they're unwilling to come to the table and talk openly with us, to be authentic, to be transparent. Right now, they may justify everything they do as for the greater good or in the best interest of the public, but they won't actually show us the mental framework or the proof that they have in order to come or jump to these conclusions. And I think it's important to understand that, in my opinion, this entire show the maple pill is about going from blue pill to red pill to black pill to clown pill, and then finally white pill. And that's a one-way street, right? That's a one-way journey. Blue pill to red pill. People don't go from red pill to blue pill. They can't unsee or unlearn once they start to understand that the institutions, the politicians, the system, the mainstream corporate press, legacy media doesn't have their best interests at heart. And so the government and the mainstream media, in my opinion, they're literally accelerating right now the loss of trust that I think a lot of you watching this have in our system and institutions. People cannot forget, and particularly those that have stood up, that have spoken out, that have protested, that have gone on that journey of becoming red-pilled or further along the journey. They can't forget what they've borne witness to. Trudeau lying about mandates and mandatory vaccinations. You can go back and look at his tweets. And, a year ago, he was saying that would be divisive and unnecessary. And yet now we're at a point in time where our government tells us that 90% of Canadians vaccinated, and yet they still hold tooth and nail to their mandates, to their restrictions, to the desire to implement vaccine passports. We've seen Trudeau demonizing those who dare disagree with him. Trudeau falsely labeling any and all of his opponents as racist, misogynist, and anti-science. Lying and gaslighting by mainstream media, which completely back him up and never call him out on his fucking bullshit. And at this point in time, in my opinion, barring the complete collapse of Justin Trudeau and the Liberal government, I can't imagine how we return to normal in this country without having to go through a lot more pain and darker days in the future. I hope I'm wrong on this. I cross my fingers I'm wrong. I hope that the vote tonight doesn't support the enactment of the Emergencies Act, and that will be the greatest white pill I could ever ask for. But we'll see how it plays out in real time. And again, I'm not sure exactly when the vote's expected, but I think it's maybe around like 8 o'clock tonight. So I encourage everyone, especially Canadians, pay attention to this. And if it does pass, we need to remember who were the politicians that decided they knew better than us? Who were the politicians that decided that they needed emergency powers, unprecedented emergency powers in this day and age? And then I can't help but feel like Trudeau's ego is truly to blame for a lot of this, because I guess I'd rather give him the benefit of the doubt and think that this is all ego rather than malicious intent on his behalf. But Trudeau's ego wouldn't allow him to treat the protesters as humans deserving of his respect, wouldn't allow him to meet with them or to hear their concerns or even just to be a sounding board for them. wouldn't allow him to ever imagine anyone could both be good and disagree with him. And that last point's really important. It literally feels like our prime minister believes that anyone that disagrees with him has to be the enemy. They can't simply have a different opinion. They can't have a different perspective. They have to be bad and evil. And we hear this consistently with his language. And mainstream media's ego and financial interest will not allow them to do anything but support the existing regime and Justin Trudeau. And again, none of us are perfect, but surely at this moment in time, and we're going to go through a lot of examples throughout tonight once I finish this monologue, and I promise I'll wrap up shortly. But there are so many examples of abuse right now, and the mainstream media is doing everything they can do to whitewash it. This should be really concerning, not just for the truckers, not just for those that are anti-mandates, not just for those that, want us to go back to normal, but for every single Canadian, because understand at some point in time, as these emergencies and these new rules calcify in our system, they'll use these blunt force weapons, not only against the current opponents of the regime, but any future opponents as well. Like any student of history can tell you, that's how it plays out. And then one last thing I want to let you guys know tonight, I'll be doing my normal 8:20 p.m. hangout. And I know a lot of you have different questions and have been wanting to discuss different subject matters with me. So I'll be going live on a separate YouTube video, again, on this exact same channel. And I'll be discussing, in my opinion, how you can try and go about protecting yourself from future government tyranny. Because as long as Trudeau is in power, it will only get worse, in my opinion. We'll talk about Bitcoin, gold and silver, real estate, social networks, prepping and homesteading. I'll give you my honest opinion about whether it's time to get the fuck out of Canada, whether you need to have a second passport plan or a second domicile plan. And again, this is just my opinion, but barring the complete collapse of the vote tonight, barring the collapse of Trudeau and his primary supporters, I think we're in for darker days before we'll see the light again. I hope I'm wrong. And predicting the outcomes of these decaying, complex, collapsing systems is very difficult, and no one's going to get it perfect. I don't claim to either. So again, this is just my opinion, but I'm going to showcase you guys a lot of the different data points and facts that I've used to kind of come to this moment in time and my personal conclusions. And again, we'll find out, in the coming hours and the coming days and months, whether maybe I'm just too black-pilled and I'm overreacting, or whether we all should have greater concern as Canadians. I've never wanted to be more wrong in my life and than right now. And you know what? I think that by the end of tonight's vote, we'll probably have a much better indication of where things stand. But even if brighter days are right around the corner, we should all look back on this and understand that we came right up to a precipice. And yeah, that's it for the monologue. We'll get into tonight's show. Sorry about being black-pilled, guys. I just I can't help it under these circumstances.